Hey, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Next Level Healing. I'm your host, Dr. Tara Perry, and I am here with Christine Melanie Benson. She is the author of Marrying Myself. I had the delicious privilege of meeting Christine at an event, and when I heard the concept of her book, my ears pricked up. I thought, that's cool. Because so much of what I'm doing with my work is there's always some part of somebody of ourselves that we're rejecting. And as much as we do the self-help stuff and the affirmations and oh, I love myself, it's crazy how something can get stuck in there that somebody's pressing down, rejecting, and what we resist persists. It's like that beach ball that, pushes up and we just try to push it down all the time. So Christine, welcome to my show.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
I loved your book because, yes, I did download it as soon as I heard the concept, and I'm thinking that's really different. That's unique. Tell us how you came about coming up with the concept.
Yeah, well, it's funny to think back because the book was a few years in the making, to say the least. And so originally I just thought of it, oh, it's going to be a fun romance story with some ups and downs. And then as I started writing and continued writing, I realized, no, this is about a lot more than just, a romance gone awry. This is about love, and it's about learning to love yourself, and how unless we do that, there's only a certain level of happiness we can ever achieve, because we're uniquely qualified to love ourselves. We're the only ones who are with ourselves every moment of every day. And so if we shortchange ourselves of that unique variety of love, then we're really missing out on just a crucial component of life and happiness. And so the book came, it just deepened for me as I wrote it and as I thought about it and just felt it in my heart. And then I hadn't conceived of the final, I'm not going to do a spoiler, but I hadn't conceived of the final scene when I started writing the book. In fact, the title Marrying Myself was just a fun title to me. It didn't have that deeper meaning. And then as time went on, I think the title sort of subconsciously influenced me. And I realized, yeah, that's what this is about. It's about committing to honor and be true to ourselves.
How long from the first time? I mean, it's so funny how creative impulses happen, and it's great that you followed through on it because are you a first-time author?
This is my debut. Yes.
I mean, that's huge. I mean, so many people, and myself included, I have had ideas for 57 books. None of them ever got read.
57. That's an
I'm coming up with a number. Well, maybe I'm one of those people that my brain is constantly going, but to actually sit down and take this baby from beginning to end and birth it is really an amazing accomplishment. What was that like to never have written a book before, have this really cool idea, and then gestate it and play with it and not even know the ending yourself until you started the birthing process?
Yeah, it was fun. I mean, it took a while, but the book has an interesting background because initially it's kind of, again, so funny to think back, but I was living in Boston at the time, which is where the book is set. And I had a friend who was this, really cool, like artsy, theatrical, kind of dramatic type. And she came to me and said, I like to write, and I know you like to write, so we should write a book together. And, let's write a romance novel because that's the genre that's most profitable. It's the only one where readership is actually increasing and profits are going up. So let's write a romance novel. And I said, okay, sure. And in my mind, I'm thinking, that's not what I would typically write. I would write something more substantive and deeper and more philosophical. But I thought, sure, it'll get me writing, because even though this is my first book, like you, I had a zillion ideas. I had started many things and just hadn't quite followed through to getting them out into the world. So with this project, I decided to take that opportunity that this friend was presenting to me. So we came up with, just a couple of starting points, about a woman who was engaged to be married to the love of her life, her true soulmate, who also happens to be incredibly wealthy, although that's not why she's marrying him.
And gorgeous.
And gorgeous. Yep. The whole enchilada. And so we came up, just again with a few plot points and decided that we would each, write a couple of chapters every week and send them to each other. So I went off and I wrote the first chapter of the book. And then and then this my friend, she just kind of flaked, which was, is part of her charm and also her, also part of her challenging side too. But so she kind of just lost interest. And I decided by then I had already kind of started thinking about the characters, thinking about the concepts, and I thought, well, screw it. I'll write the book myself. And so that's what I ended up doing. And it really
Time from when you
please don't ask that. Please don't ask.
was it a long time, short time? It had
It
been
was a long it was a long
Well,
time. Yeah.
but I would say it would have to be because I mean the detail in the book and the characters and the plot line. I mean, I loved it. I mean, I really did. I found it highly entertaining, highly engaging. The characters were interesting, relatable. I love that it didn't have a formula thing to it. It was outside the box. It was unique. It was fresh. And I liked the ultimate theme, which is, if you gotta love yourself, it starts there. We radiate a different energy when we love ourselves, don't we? If we don't love ourselves, we radiate that energy, and then that's just not attractive.
Right. I know, it's so true. It's so true. And I think people sometimes think of self-love as sort of a consolation prize, like, a poor substitute for the love of a romantic partner. And I probably felt that way myself at different points in my life, but now I've come to realize that needs to be my foundation. Like with that as a foundation, you can actually go places, you can actually do things. But if you're lacking that, like you said, you just radiate this sort of navy, just darker energy, and yeah, it's not attractive, and it doesn't feel good.
Yeah, and I've been aware of. I mean, it's so funny. We think, oh well, all I need is the perfect partner, and then everything will be great. But then you look around and you see people in partnerships, and how many of them want to be in the partnership with their? I mean, the foundation of your house is how do you feel about yourself?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's what you're born with. That's what you die with.
Totally. And, we hear a lot about abandonment issues. We've all been abandoned and betrayed and hurt and cast aside and rejected. And yes, it's painful for sure. But what I realized for myself is that, yes, all those things happened, but in real time, the person who was most abandoning myself was me. I was I was betraying myself. Anytime something bad happened, I told myself, "Oh, it's because there's something wrong with you." And I would be the first one, berating myself or criticizing myself or shaming myself. And then I realized like, oh, I don't have to do that anymore. And not only that, I don't want to do that anymore. And like, what a joy and a privilege to be there for myself, to be an advocate for myself, to be a fan of myself, not just to kind of tolerate and begrudgingly accept myself, but to be a true fan, a cheerleader. And in fact, part of what helped me get to that place is a type of therapy called internal family systems therapy.
Well, I've heard of that.
Or parts. Yeah, it's also known as parts work.
Mm-hmm.
So I became a trained practitioner in IFS, internal family systems. And it was revolutionary for me, because basically IFS teaches that we've got all these different parts to our personalities, of course, and each one of those parts is like a person. It has a whole set of fears and values and emotions and concerns. And if we talk to these parts and find out what's going on with them, even the ones that are wreaking all kinds of havoc in our life, we invariably find that in some capacity, in some way, shape, or form, they're trying to help. So for me, for instance, I've always had issues with anxiety, just I'm high strung by nature. And so anxiety has been a big thing for me. And so through my IFS work on a personal level, the way IFS therapy works is the therapist facilitates a dialogue between the client and her parts. So it takes a little getting used to, but once you do, it's pretty powerful. So when I did this with my anxious part, and started talking to that part, I just realized, oh my goodness, like this part is trying to keep me safe, and I kind of developed this almost joking, friendly relationship with that part. Like, wow, you are really on the ball. You never take a break. You're just always looking out for me.
Yeah.
And, these parts, just like people, they can learn better skills, more effective ways of accomplishing those ends, which is, to keep you safe, to get you happy. And so for me, it was just so powerful because it shifted everything inside me internally from, instead of walking around at war with myself, it was just like, no, we're all on the same side. We're all on the same team. Even these parts that are, causing some problems in my life, they're trying to help. They're like a bunch of flawed friends and, kind of bumbling buddies.
It's just that reptilian part of the brain that's trying to keep you safe, and it's doing
Totally.
it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So did you stumble across that before or after you started writing your book?
Good question. It would have been during, because again, the book was honestly probably about 10 years in the making. I worked on it in fits and starts.
It couldn't have happened overnight.
I plan to be much more efficient with my future books, but this one, it took what it took. I worked on it between work projects and that sort of thing.
So again, this internal work, which is, it's also exactly the type of work I do, because I was working with somebody yesterday who, there was a part of her that she was rejecting her entire life.
Right.
And in her case, it was worthlessness. And I mean, the tears were there, and I don't want to deal with that. I don't want any part of it. And yet that part of her was the rejected, abandoned part that just needed love.
Right.
And once I actually, I think of it as brain aikido. You don't push against that energy. You find out what it wants. What does it need?
Right.
What is it doing there? And then it just automatically turns around into something. I always say we're like iPhone 14s operating on iPhone 3 technology. How well does that work out? So, and yes, it's so crazy when all it wants is love. It wants communication. It wants understanding. It wants protection. It wants, something, but it wants it in real time, not however it learned how to function as a 2-year-old, 6-year-old, 8-year-old.
Yeah. Yeah. And in IFS lingo, that part would be considered an exiled part. Yeah. So in IFS, there are three general categories of parts. There are managers. Most parts are managers. They're just trying to keep things safe and orderly and functioning.
Yeah.
Then there are firefighter parts, which are typically addictive parts.
Yeah.
So they just think everything's an emergency, and they come swooping in and tearing down the house to put out a fire.
Yeah.
And then there are exile parts. Just these deeply wounded parts.
Yeah.
Which possibly like your clients, we often kind of reject and ignore because we're afraid that if we go to them, that the system will be overwhelmed, that they're just going to be too much for the system to bear. And the great thing about IFS is that it's able to modulate that systemic energy and keep things from becoming overwhelming. But it sounds like you just kind of intuitively found your way there. So that's incredible.
Well, yeah, it's just a different way into the same thing.
Yeah, yeah. It really is all the same stuff, loving yourself, loving all the parts of yourself, and also, figuring out how to do that, because sometimes we don't just naturally feel it. So it's not so much about a feeling, although the feeling in my experience does come, but it's about actions, and it's about, being there for ourselves. And if we notice that we have this part that we just reject and don't like, then looking at that part, talking to that part, and just figuring out the complexities of that relationship, and you know how we can learn to find some fondness for that part.
Absolutely. Yeah. Changes the energy completely.
Yeah,
It's that old saying, what we resist persists. And if you can just
totally.
be present with it. Actually, advanced meditators are very much the same way. If you feel something uncomfortable in your body, rather than push it away and try to get away from it, just go as deeply into the center of it as you possibly can, and then it's like a knot that just sort of unravels.
Right, right. And the way I've heard it described is that what we often find, and I have experienced this myself because I've had a daily meditation practice for a long time, but the act of concentration in itself is pleasant. Even if the sensation we're not feeling is pleasant, looking at
I'm
it.
glad you brought that up. I've recently gotten into ice baths. Have you done that?
I have, yes, yes. In fact, I've been to a couple of Wim Hof workshops. My boyfriend is, a follower of Wim Hof. We've never met the act. Do you know who Wim Hof is?
Oh, of course. No,
Okay.
I've been taking cold showers for years now, which is pretty, when it's 28 degrees outside, that can be a pretty crispy shower.
It could be really cold. Yeah, I've been doing that religiously for a couple of years now. I've been to some workshops and done the cold dips, and then
Your
just on a
boyfriend's
daily
first name isn't
basis.
Steven, is it?
Pardon me?
Your boyfriend's first name isn't Steven, is it?
No, no.
Okay, because
It's Elijah.
there's a Steven here that is also a Wim Hof certified instructor.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
That's
In fact, he
funny.
was one of the first people I met when I moved here. Yeah, I'm in love with it. I want to get one of those regulated things because I did 7 minutes in 47 degrees earlier this week. I'm just digging it.
Where did you do it?
A friend of mine has a tank with a temperature regulator on it.
Wow. Wow. See, I've enjoyed it, and my boyfriend has a tub that he fills with water and keeps outside. So in the winter, sometimes I'll do that. I always dread it, I just absolutely dread it, but it does really bring you to yourself,
And Wim Hof's story is so fabulous because
so powerful.
Suicide. He was desperately depressed.
Yeah.
He couldn't solve her problems. And the fact that he was a mail carrier in the UK and is now this superhuman guy going all over the world teaching people how to do this. And it's so freeing. It's like it wrings you out of because you're so present.
Yeah. 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 I didn't know he was a mail carrier.
Yeah. He was like just this ordinary guy. And now look at him. They injected him with salmonella to see what would happen, and his temperature didn't even increase because he has so much immune factors in his body that he's impervious to all this stuff. He goes climbing up the sides of icebergs half naked. I mean, he's hilarious.
He's hilarious. Yeah, the people I've had some instructors who know him and have met him, and he definitely sounds like a character. That's for sure.
I started wondering what it's like to get certified by him. I know you have to go to like Greenland and do all this stuff. And
Yeah, I think now it's a formal certification program, but my instructor that I had, whose name was Jesse, he talked about how he was one of the first people to become, an instructor, and so WIM didn't have any kind of formal program, so it was basically just going to hang out with him, and he would take them out drinking every night, and then the next day they would do this cold plunge and all this crazy, crazy stuff. It sounded,
that's
yeah.
so fun. It's so vibrant and so just in the present moment. And
Yeah.
I don't think Wim Hof has any problems with accepting himself.
I agree. I agree.
So what are the big feedback things that you've gotten from your book? Because it's such a unique premise. It's so fleshed out and well written, and you like this person that is choosing to not be all disappointed that this dream thing that we all associate as the Cinderella thing, isn't. But she, what has been the biggest feedback that you've gotten from people in terms of how it's shifted their perspective, their ideas about themselves, about the dating process?
Yeah. Well, I think it's a concept that a lot of people can relate to, is what I found. Because basically the book is about, someone who has this dream life, this fairy tale come true, and then things go off the rails. And so it's really at its essence a story about, who we are and what matters when the whole image we had of what our life was going to look like is suddenly just out the window. And I think that is something that almost everyone has to wrestle with, because whose life looks like they imagined it would. And so that's one thing that's been really interesting and just really heartening for me to see. Is just how many people and different ages and different demographics just relate to the book on that level, because I've met a lot of people, like I've done some book club discussions where people have just, confided in me afterwards just about how they themselves, they're entering a new phase of life, or they just got a divorce, or just whatever, for whatever reason, they're kind of having to start over, because that's, we all have to do that in life. Everything changes. There are new chapters, things end, things begin, and we have to find a way to keep going forward. And again, like we talked about, if we have that, self-love and self-commitment at our foundation, then, we have a leg to stand on. We can move forward. So it's been really nice to hear people's reactions in that regard. And, I had a few people tell me that, oh, they're going to go and read that last scene in the book, anytime they're feeling low. And that really meant a lot to me. So it's been really, really great hearing the reactions. Among other things, the book has a vegan protagonist. So that was one thing I was excited about, is bringing, veganism into the mainstream. And it's pretty funny because veganism, as you know, is not the focus by any stretch of the book, although it does play an integral role in the plot. But what's funny is the vegans I know who read the book, some of them have said, "Why didn't you make it more focused on the vegan stuff?" And then the non-vegans are like, "Why did you shove the vegan stuff down our throats?" So
I thought it was a cool little I don't know, just different spice in the book. I think awareness about how animals are treated in our country, worldwide, and otherwise needs to be brought. I just don't think I don't think we can consume animals that have been tortured their entire lifetimes and expect that our bodies are going to benefit from it.
Right. Yeah, I tend to agree.
And
Yeah. So,
it's buried away. I interviewed John Robbins, who you probably know,
yeah, of course. Yeah.
years ago, and a couple of times, and it's not. He took Julia Childs to see where veal was being raised, and Julia Childs, hello, cookbook, blah blah blah, and she was horrified. She said, "Oh my God, I had no idea it was this severe," and she said, "No more veal. I'm not advocating for anybody eating veal ever again."
Wow.
And that's the problem is, I mean, we just don't see it. I mean, we wouldn't treat our dogs
Exactly.
treat our
Yeah.
cats this way.
Yeah.
We wouldn't allow anybody to treat an animal this way, except it's going on in the millions behind
Exactly.
doors.
Exactly. That's what I always say. If one person alone in his basement did to an animal what, we do on a mass scale of by the billions, we call that person a psychopath. But, institutionalize it and, again, exponentialize the numbers and suddenly, oh, it's just business.
Well,
Business.
and as John Robbins says, all you have to do is stamp food on an animal, and you can treat it any way you want.
Right. Right.
And who was there was some great person, I don't know if it was Abraham Lincoln or Gandhi or somebody that says, I don't care so much about a society except how they treat their animals. Who was that? Do you remember?
Yeah, I know that quote. It might have been, yeah, it might have been Lincoln. I can't recall offhand. Yeah, something like every society is, should be judged by how it treats its animals. Yeah. Yeah. I do. That was part of my agenda, to be honest, is to help normalize veganism through the arts.
Fantastic. Fantastic. So if you were to go back in time and talk to Christine 10 years ago and give her a message to help her get through the next 10 years, what would that be?
I would tell her, just get on with it. Let go of the ego, let go of the fears. Just get on with it. Because for instance, I think, if I'm brutally honest with myself regarding how long it took to write the book, and I'm not berating myself for this, but a big part of it, I would say, is that as long as I was still working on it, I could maintain this fantasy, this grand dream of, oh, once this book is published, then my life will begin. So it was kind of ironic because in some ways I was playing out the same mindset of Julia in the book, like, oh, on this certain day, this special day when I'm chosen, my real life begins. So I think, I lost a lot. And again, it took what it took. And honestly, the process of the book was it was really fun to write. There were days when I would be between work projects and I'd sit in a coffee shop and write all day. And I realized at the end of the day, wow, I have had a smile on my face the whole day. So I loved my characters. I still love them. I loved being with them. So I think part of me didn't want to finish for that reason. Yeah, but what I would say to myself is just, get on with it, because especially for us writers, we're sensitive. We don't our books and our creations are precious to us, and it's scary to put them out in the world. It's hard to receive constructive criticism, and as a result, I would say I wasted a lot of time, because at the end of the day, if you're going to be a writer, you have to just get over that and just put things out in the world. So I would just tell myself, just, get on with it. Like, stop making things harder than they need to be, and just do what you want to do. You know what you want to do, so just do it.
And how have you been spreading the word about your book? Is it word of mouth? Are you doing, appearances? How is that process working?
Yeah, it's been a mix of different things. Appearing on podcasts is one that's been great, including some vegan podcasts. And I've also done some book club discussions, which have been really fun because the novel as you've alluded to, it has a strong self-help component, which lends itself really well to book club discussions. So I've done a couple of book club groups here in Nashville and Charleston. I've got one coming up in Florida. And then I've also been at several vegan conferences where I, let people know about the book or offer my book for sale there. So it's been a mix of different things. Those are the primary ones.
Well, when you're that happy, smiling from ear to ear, and time goes by, that's kind of living your dharma, isn't it?
True. Yes. Yeah.
You have another one in the works.
I do. And this one was inspired by a talk that I gave at a place in Nashville called Sunflower Cafe. I was hosting an event for another author and a true hero of mine named Will Tuttle, who wrote a book called The World Peace Diet. And so I gave an introductory talk about self-love. And after that talk, I had several people come up to me and say, you really need to write a book on this. And I had been contemplating that a little bit. So the plan is to write a companion guide to marrying myself.
Yeah.
Companion guide. That's going to be a self-love playbook. I don't want to call it a workbook.
That's wonderful. That's
yeah.
so great.
Yeah. So that's the plan. So aiming for that to be out next year.
Fantastic. And how did you go about getting a publisher? Did you self-publish? How did you do this?
Marrying myself. Yeah, that was part of why the process took so long as well, was the way the publishing process works is first you submit to agents. Yep. So that's that's a task. That's definitely a big hurdle for a first-time writer because people don't know who you are and they're flooded with submissions. So submitted to literary agents, and then had some interest from a few agents, and one agent in New York City asked me, she liked the book and believed in the book, but wanted some revisions. And among other things, the book was far too long for its genre. So they have very hard upper word limits for women's fiction, which is the genre of this book. So I needed to cut the book down by a third.
And did you do that?
I did that. Yes. It was tough. And I'd still like to do something with the chapters that were cut. I'm trying to figure out some way to offer those up because I liked those chapters as well. So revision after revision, communicating with this agent who just gave me so much helpful feedback. There were a couple of agents, in fact, at the same agency who were all reading the book and giving me input and suggestions. And, in my mind, of course, it was just, oh, geez, how many rounds of this are we going to go through? But at the same time, of course, it's just priceless to have people who care enough about a work to want it to be, the best it can be. So working with this agent, getting the book into shape and marketable and commercially viable. And then I signed formally with that agent. And then the next stage of the process is the agent submits to publishers. So that's what we did, and then ended up entering into a publishing deal with an independent press in Texas. So I was going
a lot easier to do the second thing that you're doing now that you've already paved the way with the first, that people are familiar with your work.
Yes. I mean, I think there is something to that, although my next work is a totally different genre. And in fact, I think I'm going to self-publish the Marrying Myself Companion Guide, just because it feels right, especially when it's about self-love. It kind of seems appropriate to self-publish, and I think I can market it well, just through the events I attend and I have some ideas. And also I just want to learn more about self-publishing and just see how it goes.
That's great. Love to see people being just guided by what makes sense for them.
Yeah.
Powerful. Beautiful.
By the way, thank you for all the kind things that you've said about the book. I really appreciate that. That means so much to me.
You're welcome. Well, it was really a joy to read. It was kind of my little I don't know, it was just a fun way to, it was my way to fill up my day in a way that was just exciting and fresh. Like, oh, I wonder which way this is going to go now.
Yeah, I will say the process of writing the book, some of those scenes just came out of nowhere. Like, I had a general concept of how the plot would develop, but some of the side stories I didn't see coming myself. So it was kind of funny because I told myself, well, I have to finish this book because I have to see see what else happens.
Right. What was the best thing about having a strong idea and seeing it through from beginning to end? What was the best takeaway that you got from that?
Well, again, getting back to self-love, it was seeing something through and just saying, for one, like I said, I felt a real devotion to my characters, and so I was determined to get them out into the world. I felt I owed it to them. I had that obligation and responsibility. So the process of submitting was kind of ameliorated by just my attitude and feeling that I'm advocating for these characters that I care about and who deserve to be heard, who've gone unseen their whole lives, and now they deserve to be seen. And then just on a personal level, again, so many writing projects in the past that have gone unfinished or, have just languished, not being put out into the world. And so with this book, again, it had kind of a serendipitous beginning, and then I was just determined to see it through. And it was an interesting process. Again, letting go of the ego and just, submitting and revising and working on it. But again, I always knew intuitively, just at my core, that getting this book out into the world was the biggest act of self-love that I could, commit.
Yes.
So I knew I had to do it.
That's
And then what I realized quickly after I signed my publishing deal was that, oh, writing the book is the easy part. It's what comes after writing the book, with the agents and the publishers and the marketing. Oh, that's a whole other skill set, a whole other profession even.
Yeah, I've interviewed a number of New York Times bestsellers, and it used to be back in the day that when you had a publisher, you could sort of sit back and let them do all the legwork. And these days, you got to be out there promoting your little tushy off, from what I understand.
100%. Yeah. You got to hustle.
Creative you are, the more insightful you are about who you're most serving and where you're showing up to do that. That seems to be really key. Is that correct?
Yes. And finding ways, of course, to do it organically. I always feel, I'm not a fan of self-promotion, but again, just, if I don't tell people about my book, they're not going to find out about it.
Yeah, and like you were championing the characters in your book, which I think is
right.
An interesting perspective. If you don't champion yourself, then people don't get to experience the benefits of the gifts that you're bringing.
Yeah. It was really funny because I was working with a business coach at one point, and she interviewed, a publisher and had people, submit different questions about how to get your book published and what the process is like. And it was funny because he was kind of a tough love guy, and just, well, if you're submitting and getting rejections, maybe the book just isn't very good. Maybe you just stop. I mean, he wasn't that harsh, but he was a little bit cold. And then I forget how it came up, but somehow I had mentioned to her, that I felt I owed this to my characters and just had to do this for my characters. And it was so funny because his response was just like, he just kind of came to a hard stop and was like, okay, okay. Well, in that case, you just do it. You got to do it.
That's great. Can I ask, and knowing that Chicken Soup for the Soul, I think, got rejected, I don't know how many thousands of times. How many rejection letters did you have to go through?
A lot. Yeah, I kept a spreadsheet. I had decided because again, the first hurdle for a new author is finding that literary agent.
Right.
And so I was, submitting. I kept a spreadsheet of my various submissions, and I had decided, okay, if I get to 100 and still don't have any takers, then I'll revisit this idea. So it was short of 100, but it was getting up there. And
Yeah.
some of those people responded positively, but just, oh, this isn't the kind of thing I represent. This isn't quite up my alley, but
Yeah.
but I like it. So it wasn't like, all harsh, mean
Yeah.
rejection. But
I love the idea and the mindset that failure is not. Unfortunately, school trains people to think that you never fail and you do everything by yourself, and that's the exact opposite of what success is built on. Success is built on loving to fail because you haven't tried if you haven't failed. Failed
right.
is an absolutely necessary component of success, and so is working with other people because sometimes it's the who, not the how.
It really is. And in fact, the way that I first connected with this literary agent was, you can research for agents. You can find them online, but again, they're so flooded with submissions that unless you have some kind of personal contact, it's going to be tough to get eyes on your manuscript. And so I had gotten into the practice of just asking everybody I knew if they knew any literary agents.
Right.
And I was working at this law firm in downtown Nashville and was chatting in the kitchen one day with this employee there who was a really nice guy, very gregarious, the kind of guy who knows a lot of people. And I said, Gordon, do you happen to know any literary agents? And he like scratched his head and said, I know an editor. Would that help? I said, sure. He's like, I'll call her. So he went and called this editor friend, and she asked me to send a few chapters, and she liked them and said, I think this might be a good fit for an agent I know named Jane Von Marin in New York. And, why don't you send it to her? And so that was the woman who ended up becoming my agent.
What a great lesson.
Yeah. Yeah.
Lesson. Yeah, when we own our stuff and we're just out there asking for what we need. I mean,
Right. I mean,
great exercise that you can do where you like go to heaven and there's this room that you're not supposed to go in. Have you heard this one? Have you done that?
no.
Yeah, and in that room, it's like heaven's great and it's wonderful, but you're not supposed to go in this one room except one day the door is a little bit open, so the guy goes in there and he's like, and the room is what is all the stuff that you could have had if you just asked.
Right. Right. Yeah, there's that
Really,
thing
think
too.
about that. And so many of us, this goes back to worthiness. If you don't feel worthy, you're not going to show up, stand in your own 2 feet and ask.
Yeah.
What's the worst that somebody's going to say? Nope, sorry, don't know anybody. So no, don't. Your work wasn't for me. Whatever. You're not looking for that. Okay, that's one more that isn't what I'm looking for. The one that I'm looking for is.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So it's been a good exercise. And, again, people people are going to respond to my book or they're not. It's not for everybody. Obviously, it's got a, target genre audience, and and that's fine. But what I've just been keeping in mind is that in many cases, if I'm at a party or just some event, if I don't mention my book, chances are they're never going to hear about it. So,
So where is
I
the best place for people to get your book? Amazon, Audible? I listen to it on Audible. And do you read it on Audible?
No, unfortunately. I wish I'd had the chance. Unfortunately, the publisher controlled that process. So,
Okay. It was still
yeah.
incredible. It was still delightful. I loved it. Very entertaining, very engaging. I found that it was just my thing that I wanted to go to if I wanted to, have a nice little tasty treat for the day.
I love that description. Yeah. Yeah, it's a fun read. I think of it as a fun read, but with substance, that kind of leaves you thinking. I hope I accomplished that at least.
Oh, 100%. Because again, I love that it wasn't formula. I love it that it had a message that is so important to our personal development. Your and I work, crosses over that way, that it's about finding that part of us that we're rejecting, that we're not seeing, that we're experiencing a block.
Yes.
And dance with it, having a relationship with it, opening up our hearts to it, accepting it. And that really is, I think, the foundation for so much of the strife and struggles that our world is experiencing, because it's that, what is it about ourselves that we don't like? What is it that
Right. Yeah, the way I put it, and I'll go into this more in the book that I'm working on now, but I really think we need a self-love revolution, because unless we have that, like you said, that's at the root of all other social ills.
Yeah.
And as far as the book goes, I have a friend who called it the anti-romance romance, which I loved, because it, kind of flips the traditional notion of romance on its head, and just highlights that at the end of the day, our most important relationship is the one we have with ourselves.
Yeah.
So as far as where people can get the book, all the usual places, but I would suggest visiting my website, ChristineMelanieBenson.com.
Fantastic.
And I also have information on there about my IFS coaching work.
Fantastic. And I really, it's really authentic self-love. It's not the, oh, gee, I'm strutting my stuff, I'm beautiful.
Right.
Right. I'm okay on all levels. Even the parts of me that I previously thought weren't okay, they're really, just parts of me that needed some extra love, attention, acceptance, nurturing, yada, yada, yada.
Yep. I know, self-love, it sounds so basic, and we hear about it all the time. And yet it's so deep, and it really is a lifelong journey, because, love deepens, love grows, love expands. And so we find different ways, and we may think that we're loving ourselves, and then come to realize, oh, I was and I wasn't,
Right.
So I think there's always more to learn and more to discover. And the great thing about that is that it's an amazing process.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Christine, thank you so much. I have a hunch that we're going to run into each other in town sometime soon, which would be great.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. This has been so much fun. And again, thank you for reading my book, and thank you for just having me. It's been a true delight.
Fantastic. And if you enjoyed this interview, if you got value from it, please click like and subscribe. And we will see you on the next episode of Next Level Healing.